All right, I'm Elizabeth Mahusai, and I am really looking forward to interviewing Rhyan Sikorski today as we talk about Not Your Mama's Homeschooling. And we chose that title here, Rhyan, share with us today that what we're seeing nationwide is definitely not what we would consider to be the homeschooling model that has been around really for a really long time, and what people might be accustomed to when they think of the term homeschooling. So I'm going to open us in a word of prayer, and then we are going to dive right in. So Heavenly Father, thank you so much for our time together. Thank you for the opportunity to encourage each other, Father, and to have conversation about what it looks like in the environment in which we find ourselves with e-learning and schooling at home, in the midst of also working and trying to manage home details, folks that are really trying to do something that they didn't choose to do. And so, Father, I pray it would be an encouragement and that you would be present in our conversation. And we just ask that all things would glorify you. And I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen. Amen. Okay, so I want you to know that Rhyan, so we met Rhyan and her husband. Goodness, it's been a few years now. They were in one of mine and Fred's Love and Respect marriage classes. That's where we really first got to know them. Jeff is an aerospace engineer, and so they've been married for 11 years, and so that they have 3 children, and they are like the cutest kids ever. I love them so much. They are adorable, and you can see their photo on the Facebook event. But Rhyan also actively homeschools, and she also helped to start a homeschool ministry at Cottonwood Creek Church, where I'm the women's minister. And she's on my leadership team as well, which is why I wanted her to be able to share with you, not only from her experience, but also because I knew she would be able to provide some much needed encouragement. All right, so Rhyan, tell them the names of your children and their ages, because I can't remember them and I don't want to mess it up.
All right, so Caitlin is our oldest, and she is 9 years old. And then we have Carter. He's our little boy in the middle, and he just turned 6. His birthday was actually 3 weeks ago today, kind of right when all this started. So he's been one of these little quarantine birthdays, I guess. And then our youngest is Charlotte, or Charlie May, as we call her, and she is 2.5. She'll be 3 in August.
Okay, I thought she was already 3. Okay, so
right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm aging her way too quickly. All right, and you've been homeschooling them, and so let's start there, because you're very familiar with when people use the term homeschool. Mm-hmm. It's what we would expect. Okay, so there's homeschool, and then there's what we're in right now.
Right.
So help them to understand the difference. Why is what's happening right now, we can't really call it homeschooling because it's not the same, thus the title, Not Your Mama's Homeschooling. So right. Give them the difference between what those look like.
So, a lot of times when parents traditionally homeschool, what we would all call homeschooling, they spend hours, they spend weeks, months, sometimes even years thinking about the decision, praying about the decision, researching curriculum before they actually make the decision to do so. But in this case, what's happened in the last month is parents have been thrust into the role without any choice, without any say. They don't have a say in the curriculum. They don't have a say in sometimes the requirements, depending on the district. So there's really a big difference, because it's a totally different mindset when you've chosen something versus when you are pushed into a role that maybe sometimes you didn't want. So that's kind of the difference. And some people have called it, now they're schooling at home instead of saying homeschooling, or they're calling it e-learning, whatever.
Right.
But that's kind of one of the fundamental differences, is just the fact that, like I had a choice several years ago to decide whether or not we wanted to homeschool. Parents in the last month haven't had that same opportunity. They've been forced to do it.
Well, and that's something that we could really hang out on that just for a moment. When you and I were talking, Rhyan, we talked about crisis schooling. Mm-hmm. And one of my friends that's in Florida who has 7 children, ages like toddler to 13, she was like, you can't even put those 2 words together because I'm not sure what's happening in my home is actually schooling.
Right.
So I know that it's stressful.
Mhm.
And it's interesting that same mama who is does a lot of advocacy where fostering is concerned. She talked about trauma, and because she deals with a lot of children who have trauma, and she's welcomed a lot of kids who have been affected by trauma into her home. And she was saying that that same heightened awareness that she knows because of dealing with trauma victims, she said that's how she feels when it comes to their schooling. It's like this heightened awareness of stress, of anxiety, and so we can't underestimate how that impacts a family that's now thrust into this situation. So, okay, so we recognize that it's different. That's important. What? Give them a tip on, okay, knowing that it's different. You didn't have a choice. You didn't get to choose the curriculum. What's a practical tip or encouragement that you would give them?
Well, first I'd like to say too, even those of us who are seasoned, what I'd call seasoned homeschoolers, it's not the same for us either right now. It's because we're in this global, nationwide crisis. We are adjusting and having to adjust our schooling as well. What our normal homeschooling looks like has been completely kind of upended as well, with the addition of maybe a spouse working from home, or not being able to go do activities or co-ops or stuff like that. So it's an adjustment for veteran homeschoolers as well. But for either, party, for either camp, one of the things that I would just remind us all, myself included, to remember is that this isn't going to last forever. It may feel some days like it's going to last forever because we don't have like an end date. We can't say, okay, April 30th, we can leave the house and get back to normal. We don't have an end date, but it will not last forever. This is temporary. And I would challenge us all to look for the blessings where we can find them. There are times when it annoys me that my husband is now working from home, but I try to also see that I'm thankful that he's able to work from home and be home with us a little bit more than normal. And then also look for some things that maybe you weren't able to be a part of before, but now because of this, you've been given the opportunity to be part of with your kids learning and their education. And then finally we got to change our mindset a little bit and recognize that this isn't normal, and it's not going to look normal, and we have to let go of that expectation, and then just try to have a good attitude about it, because our attitude will dictate in a lot of ways the attitude of our kids toward this. And so if we have a better attitude toward it, then our kids will be a little bit more likely and willing to also have good attitudes about it.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. If we'll set the tone with how we approach it and the things that they hear us saying about it, how we talk to our friends about it, that does make a big difference. I totally agree with that. All right, so let's move to, the fact that parents have to have make sure that we've got a good mindset about it. And because we're going to set the tone, and now we're thinking about the students. So, I mean, your son and daughters, I mean, they knew what to expect, right? They know what schooling at home is like, but for all of these kids that got brought from school into home with restrictions of being able to go out and all of those things, just you put all of that together, now you've got kids who are faced with having to, whether it's learn to do things online, or they're scrambling to figure out how to learn concepts that were already difficult for them when they were in school. So you talk about kids needing grace. So I want you to kind of expand that. When you say that kids need grace, but also the parents need grace, so what does that look like?
So to start off with, our kids could use an extra dose of grace. Because what's happened in the last month, it happened, I say quickly, just because it's felt like we went from maybe one little restriction to a whole bunch of restrictions, and within just a few days. And so in that time, kids lost a lot. They lost a lot of things that they were used to, their routine, their ability to be with their friends. Like you said, now they're having to do stuff online, whereas they weren't before. And so we have to remember that they may be struggling with feelings toward that. Maybe they're angry, maybe they're scared, maybe they're afraid. But then on the flip side, we have to give ourselves grace, because not only were they thrust into it, but we were as well. And maybe, we're carrying extra burdens of losing a job, or income, loss of income, but we also lost our routines and our schedules and all of that stuff that we were kind of in a groove maybe, and now it's all been upended. And so I just we need to give ourselves grace, in all of it, but especially schooling. Let go of perfection, let go of what you think it might look like, and just give grace to ourselves, our kids, but also to the teachers who are on the other side and who are having to figure out how to teach virtually. I know they're working so hard, and it can be a challenge on their end. And so I just hope that we can give them grace, as well.
That's actually a very good point. Thinking about all three of those. Something that you had mentioned was the idea that part of this, the reason why we need to have grace, is that there's a certain amount of grieving going on as well. So we have a senior in high school who, his prom is now canceled, and we're not certain if the other activities that he would normally be able to enjoy as a high school senior will actually happen. So people are also maybe not realizing, they're not connecting it to grief, but yet they are grieving the loss of something.
Definitely, because there are things that we've had to let go of, that we've had to say, we're not going to be able to do that. I had things, I was going to take my kids to see their favorite band in concert. I had tickets for their birthdays, and that was supposed to be here in about 2 weeks. And it's gotten rescheduled, but it's been rescheduled to next year. So, I had to tell them, that, hey, we're not gonna be able to do this for a while. And it was upsetting to them. It was upsetting to me. So it is kind of like grief, because you're losing things that you had looked forward to and that, you were excited about. And that it's a process. It's a process to kind of work through those emotions, in that.
One of the things too, and speaking with, a couple of parents that, they are dealing with a broad variation in how school districts are handling this. Yes. So like in California, there's a huge section of students who can't even get e-learning because they're having issues with servers and technology. And then you have, just in our area in Collin County, 3 or 4 major school districts, all of which that have slightly different variations on what they're doing, the extent to which they're having to work. You've got some teachers requiring 6 hours of work a day in elementary school, yes, and others who are let's just try to get through this.
Right.
So how would you encourage parents, thinking about giving grace to teachers? How would you encourage parents to engage the teachers and also their children? Because in a sense now they've been put in this in-between role, right, between teachers and students, their children. So how would you encourage a parent where that's concerned?
From what I can tell, and I admit I am not entirely familiar with how it's operating. I've asked some friends to gain some insight, because I am familiar with how the districts are handling everything. But one of the things that I've seen the most of is parents are struggling to try to keep everything straight, where to log in, where to send stuff, getting dashboards to work. And so I think I would ask or recommend first that if you are finding difficulty with something, ask the teacher, but ask it nicely. And just remember that some of this isn't what they've chosen either, that this is maybe what their district has mandated. So I would just ask, try to keep up with their assignments, try to keep up with what the teacher has asked. But if there is a challenge, go to that teacher kindly and just say, hey, this isn't working, or this isn't working, or I need some clarification. But just to make sure that we handle it with kindness and grace, and remembering that we're all, having to deal with this the best we can.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, and I think key there, communicating, right?
Okay.
Taking the time to, whether you're on the phone or you're over email, you're taking the time to communicate,
Right.
and so that you have clear expectations and also a clear understanding of what needs to happen. So I think that is that's a good word there. Okay, so you talk about not worrying about the extra.
Yes.
And there's a lot that could go into the extra. So
Yeah.
tell us what you mean when you say don't worry about the extra.
So what I mean by extra is when all this went down, I saw so many parents who were saying, I need tips. I need I need tips for schooling, for supplemental school. I need all these ideas. They were wanting to just fill in the gaps, basically, until the school sent stuff. And then the school did send stuff. And so now I see parents still wanting to fill all, basically the whole day, because they feel like that they've got to have them in school the same number of hours. And so I would just say it's okay to let that stuff go some days, if not, let it go every day. But don't feel like you have to fill every single hour, every single day with extras. If some days all you can get done is the required work, that's great. If some days you feel like doing a whole bunch of extra stuff, go for it. But don't feel like a failure if you can't get the extra done, or you don't feel like it, or it's not working with your kids. I don't know. I just say, just let go of the extra, because sometimes the extra will make us crazy right now. We've got a lot that we're dealing with, and our kids are dealing with quite a bit too. So the extra is not really as important, yeah. I don't think.
I'm thinking, like, on days like today where it's sunny and beautiful and the weather is gorgeous, yes. Like I'm all about, school is outside.
Yes.
Yes. Maybe you do a short amount of school, but then you are outside.
Yes. That second week of quarantine, after it was we'd had like 13 days of straight rain. The majority of that week, my kids spent it outside playing. They had been I've been noticing a lot of anxiety in them, kind of with what was going on. My husband started working from home, which that kind of was a signal to them that, hey, this is serious, very weird going on. So the sun came out, it stopped raining, and they spent hours outside each day. And I noticed so much of an improvement in their attitudes and just in kind of their emotional well-being, because they were able to get outside and play. And for my son, I let him get muddy, which is his love language. So he's a happy dude.
That's boy code right there.
Yes.
Like the dirty.
Definitely take school outside if possible. Take it and use, chalk on the sidewalk, and send
that
it
could be art
to a teacher. Yeah, I could double for art and do a spelling list, or do math problems, or whatever. You can take it outside, and the benefits are multiple. You're getting some vitamin D, you're getting some just emotional well-being, and boosting your immune system, and then you're also getting some schoolwork done. So
yeah, I like that idea, because there's been a high amount of chalk art, and
yes.
and the kids writing messages on the sidewalk, and so really that's something that I just want to encourage those who are on and who listen, that think outside the box. Like, how can you connect different activities and accomplish schooling purposes, but it's done so in a way that is creative. I would just share from the high school standpoint, because I have a chemistry degree, and so I've been tutoring virtually students who need help in chemistry. Mm-hmm. And Zoom and I share my screen and we talk through problems and so it's a way again to think out of the box to help students who are struggling through some tough concepts. And I think that, I'm also thinking like older students, their teachers are providing Zoom opportunities for them, to collaborate and to talk and things like that. So I do think thinking outside the box is really, really helpful. All right, let's wrap this up. You had provided some additional tips that I really liked. And so I'm going to hit on the first one because the fact that we are all sheltered in place and, under this quarantine, your first thing was to make time each day for the Lord. And really, this season is a great time if that was not already a habit in your home to create that or to start it. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's so important to start each day. Excuse me. It's to start each day with the Lord, because it helps you to focus on the Lord and not so much on maybe the anxieties of the world going on right now. And there's a lot of days that we may wake up and we'll feel like we are very inadequate and like, I don't want to do this because I'm going to fail. And that's Satan, he's preying on our fear and insecurities to tell us that we can't. But we can, because the Lord has promised us in 2 Timothy that he didn't give us a spirit of fear and timidity, but he gave us a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. Yeah. So we can do this. It may feel hard some days, but if we start those days out with the Lord, then that helps to ground us through the rest of the day. And also if we're maybe having a prayer time where we incorporate it with our kids and maybe read a scripture or two, it doesn't have to be super long. That helps them too. So really the benefits could be all around if we make that a priority, because normally school mornings are super hectic. If you're, especially public school, you're up super early and you're having to get out the door. Now you don't have to do that. You can be a little bit more flexible on your time. So I would just encourage us to make sure that we're starting those days out with the Lord, with our kids.
Well, and to that point, I have a dear friend. She's homeschooled and sent off to college 4 of her 5 children. And she was saying that all through her homeschooling time, they always slept until they woke up. And then they got up and they did school. Yep. That was her thing, so that the mornings were not so crazy because she had control over that. So again, that's that giving yourself grace and, in terms of your start time and things.
Right, for sure. And I'm not a morning person. Like sunrises are beautiful, but I prefer to see them from behind my eyes. So we don't get started super early, but it's okay. We still get our work done. So I let the kids,
and that's what matters, right?
Yeah. So everybody's different. Some families like to get up and start school by 7, and that's great. I sometimes wish I was more like that, but I'm not at all.
All right, so a couple of other things that I liked in your tips section that will be in the PDF that we post for you all is focusing on gratefulness. This is something, Samuel being a tuba player, that's our son, and his high school band director had the kids fill out a Google form expressing 3 things for which they were thankful, and then he kind of created an artwork of that. So tell them, give them some specific things about how you've incorporated this in your home, to give them some ideas.
Well, I know for myself, one of the things that I've had that I make sure that I am thankful for every day is the fact that, my husband is able to work from home. Because I'm not going to lie, it's been a big schedule adjustment with him being home and being on conference calls during the day. It's, we've all kind of been upended within the house. And so, but when I feel myself getting a little irritated or a little, annoyed, I try to remind myself to be thankful that he's got a job and he's able to work from home. I know he's safe. He's able to stay home and not have to get out, not be on the roads or anything. So I try to focus on that. And with the kids, again, when there's the attitude of, oh, we're missing this, we're missing that, I do acknowledge those feelings, but also remind them of what we have to be thankful for. Like, it's like, you know, the fact that we're healthy, the fact that we're able to stay home and be all together and to spend this extra time together, not having to rush and, you know, go to art or go to scouting or, you know, whatever. We're able to just relax and be home more together. So
That's good. Okay, so I want to say for those who are actually on the Zoom, if you have a particular question, I want you to type that in the chat over at the bottom. That way we can see it, and I'll be able to ask Ryan those here in just a moment. So I wanted to make sure to let you know that that's where you're able to actually type your questions out. Okay, last thing that I wanted you to share, and this kind of goes back to when we were talking about you know, just that the flexibility of getting up when, you know, what your start time is and all of that. I want you to speak to the concept of scheduling and kind of your thoughts on scheduling. And then also, even in the midst of that, this idea of age appropriate independence, which I think is important. So speak to those two things. And then if anybody has any questions, I'll get to those.
So everybody's different. Everybody's situation right now might be a little different with work, with just different personalities and how families work. So this is kind of, I threw it out there, but I also want people to know it's not like you have to do it. But I would suggest that if you're struggling with having enough time to make a schedule, maybe even use the block technique where it's like, okay, from 7 to 7:30, that's kind of wake up, 7:30 is breakfast, 8 o'clock, we will start, you know, devotional time. You know, that might work for some people, especially if they're also having to work themselves from home. Doing the block schedule may help make it a little easier to do all that. I know growing up, I was homeschooled myself. We didn't have a set start time, but we had a schedule in that we always did the same subjects in order. That was kind of our schedule. And it was, we started around the same time. I mean, it was never like, okay, we have to start at 9 o'clock or, you know, 8 o'clock, whatever. But we would start and we would go through the list, and then I would get my assignments, and then we would break for lunch. And then the afternoon was spent doing, you know, essentially homework.
Okay.
And that was our schedule, although it wasn't a rigid or super rigid.
Okay.
But some people may find in this season, especially like I said, if they themselves are having to work from home, that the block technique may work a little bit better.
Okay.
But again, it also depends on your family. You know how your family works. You know how things work best in your family dynamics. So it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just kind of a suggestion. And also, if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to let it go. Or if something's not working, don't be afraid to say, okay, it's not really working, so let's try something else. There's no shame in that. But then also, one thing that will help too is allowing your kids age appropriate independence. And that just means, you know, you can go back to the schedule, review it as a family, have some rules maybe that you can refer to, like when you're super busy, and you can say, okay, well, the rules are, you know, you only have one snack between lunch and dinner, and here's the bucket of the snacks, and you know, this is the rule. But with age appropriate independence, you know, there are tasks that they can do on their own, and maybe new tasks that they will find that they enjoy. And so I would just, you know, encourage everybody to maybe let their kids try out some new tasks and see if they can enjoy those and master them. And many kids will, you know, enjoy the predictability that comes with the schedule and with, you know, some rules on how to do things, like, you know, with maybe the pantry, or how often you can snack, or, you know, what just chores that need to be done, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, so. I think that's good. I think you're right. It does. Each family is different. Of course, for the most part, those who are in a school situation are used to a much more rigid routine or schedule.
Right.
And they might want that, or they might go, but wait, this is home and I'm not liking that, right? And so
Right,
I
right.
think I think this is where it's important to seek what the Lord has for your family, allow Him to lead that, um, and then give yourself grace, right, in the process.
Right.
And
Yeah.
let the extras go if they're not working. Don't get caught up on it has to be this way. And
Yes.
I wanted to add too that I think in our day of social media where people, I mean, it's so easy to take a photo of like, all my kids are working, it all looks so
Mhm.
organized.
Yes.
And, and then someone else looks at that and goes, oh, I'm a failure. I can't do it. When in fact that, that photo is a moment in time, and who knows what it looked like before or what it looked like after. We
Mhm.
have to be so careful in the comparison thing.
Yes, for sure. And there's a lot of I've seen it in a lot of homeschooling arenas where people were like, oh, but I don't have the right space. I don't have the right setup. And so maybe in this age where you're having to do more school at home, you're feeling kind of frustrated by the fact that you don't have a dedicated space to do school. And that's okay. I grew up homeschooled, and it was only the first 4 or 5 years, I think, that we had kind of a more dedicated schoolroom, and the rest of my school years we did schoolwork at the table. My mom had a little cubby that she would have next to the table, and it had all her teaching stuff in it, and another one had all my stuff in it and my sister's, and we would do school at the table, and then we'd have to make sure the table was cleared, and we were done by the time it was time to set the table for dinner. So it's okay if it doesn't look like it's a Pinterest space. Pinterest is great, but it can also be kind of evil because we can be so tied up into, oh, is this Pinterest worthy? And
Who cares?
it doesn't right now. Right now, it does not matter. It's okay if you're doing schoolwork at the kitchen table, or if you're doing schoolwork in the living room on the couch, or in wherever.
Right.
Do what works for you. If you love and you have the ability to have a Pinterest worthy space, that's great. But if you don't let it discourage you, and don't let it make you feel like you're failing because you see somebody else has one.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good word right there. That's a good word. Well, I have really enjoyed just being able to talk through this. I do want to let those who are listening know that the PDF will be located on the Women of Cottonwood Facebook page. If you click on events and choose Not Your Mama's Homeschooling, you will find the PDF document there that you'll be able to download and have. So I wanted you to know how you can get a hold of that. And also, you'll be able to share freely the link to the audio portion of this. I also want to point out that on the PDF that Ryan put together for you, she's listed some resources for you, including a coronavirus homeschool support group on Facebook, which I thought was super, super helpful. And then they also have a website I see as well. And then just to close us out, Ryan, with telling us a little bit about your vision for the homeschool ministry at Cottonwood Creek.
So the homeschool ministry at Cottonwood Creek, my heart for that is to really be a place where homeschoolers within the church can get to know each other. And that also we can be a resource to people who are new to homeschooling or who are thinking about homeschooling. And then, like I said, to also, if people are new to the church that homeschool and that want to make connections kind of, with that we can be a place where we can help people within the church connect to each other. So that's really kind of my heart for it. We are talking about doing some different things coming up once all this virus stuff is over. So looking forward to hopefully getting some of that out.
I love it. I love it. Well, know that I appreciate your time, and I know it'll be a blessing for those, the ladies who are on, as well as those who listen. And I'm with you. I do want to say, thinking about how we've been impacted by COVID, Fred and I were catching up on some of the news, and I heard that today, for the first time, the train out of Wuhan, China was back in service.
Yes.
And they were allowing transportation, and I was like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes, and
it's
New York is also, I think, I read that they are releasing more patients than they're admitting for the first time in weeks.
yes,
So
he
that's
said
very
he wants,
encouraging too.
yeah, obviously wants them to stay continuing to do the things that are needed, but encouraging things from him. He's in control of that timeline as well.
Right.
But
Yes.
for now, I'm thankful that we could talk about this, because people, for sure through the end of April, they're doing e-learning, schooling at home,
Yes.
crisis schooling, whatever we want to call it. We just know it's not your mama's homeschooling.
No.
So thank you, Rhyan.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.